So, I mean, when I'm working with people that are buyers and they decide that they want to try to find businesses for sale that are not listed for sale with business brokers, then the most important thing is to identify what industry you want to buy in. And so, if you know what kind of business you want and you know the area that you're willing to purchase in, well, it's very easy, for example, if you say, I want to buy an auto repair business in a certain state or province, really a lot of the times you just need Google or some other search engine or maybe even a telephone directory, and you can find all those businesses. The next step is how do I make it known to those people that I'm interested in buying? And so, people will do cold calling, they'll reach out on the computer, LinkedIn, Facebook, etc., depending on the industry and where in the world it is. Or in the old fashioned way, they'll send out letters or they'll go and they'll visit the business owners. Most of the people that you talk to are not going to be interested in selling their business. They're busy working in the business, they're earning money from it. But the top 5 reasons why somebody wants to sell a business, the first one is burnout, boredom, and fatigue. So somebody loses their passion for the business, they don't want to do it anymore. Then there's divorce, poor health, the need to relocate, and finally retirement. And 4 out of those 5 reasons are not planned for. They're personal things that come up in a person's life. And so this is one of the reasons why I say to business owners that they should always be prepared to sell because they never know when one of these things could affect them. A doctor could tell you that you're ill. And so all of a sudden you realize, hey, if there's no one in my family that wants to take over this business, I'm going to have to sell it. Now I need to find a buyer. So if that seller had already met you, for example, if you had come by looking for a business to buy and you left a letter or a card, well, now they know someone who wants to buy. So I've had experience, for example, with people that I've been coaching through this process where well, I'll give you an example. There was a couple, married couple, and they wanted to buy a bakery in the Toronto area and either a cupcake or a wedding cake bakery. And they ended up mailing out letters to almost 200 bakeries. And they did get 15 or 20 phone calls back. And they went and they met with some owners and they worked on some deals, but they weren't able to make a deal. And they moved to another city. They moved to Ottawa. But in the 2 years after they mailed those letters, they got another 30 phone calls from other people who weren't ready to talk about selling at that time, but they were something happened in that person's life in the following 2 years that they wanted to reach out and talk with them. So it's planting seeds and building relationships and making yourself known to these business owners.
Yeah. And what I see is that most young people are running after businesses that are off market. But when I meet with those smart buyers, they're suggesting that brokerage is something you want to get because the seller is already has thought in his mind that I'm waking up this morning and I want to sell my business because an emergency has emerged right now that I haven't expected. And so, what do you prefer, going off market or going with a brokerage? Because I've heard that brokerage does not get you what the off market deals gets you.
Yeah, so it's when somebody goes to a broker, the business owner is indicating a compulsion to sell. They've already identified that they have a reason that they need to sell their business, and that's why they're going to the broker. But let's think about why they go to the broker. They know that the broker is going to charge them a commission. It's going to cost them some money. And they're hoping that the broker is going to be able to create competition amongst buyers. And this increased number of buyers is going to be able to cause the price to be higher to more than compensate for the commission that the broker is going to charge. When I was a business broker, that's what I used to tell business owners. I used to say, hey, I can create competition. I can get more than one person interested. So, yes, these people are demonstrating compulsion. You may have to face competition with other buyers. But if you're going to use brokers, the one thing I will say is don't just rely on seeing what they put on the internet, for example, as business for sales listings. You should try to build a relationship with that broker. You should let them know what you're interested in. You should let them know what kind of resources you have, what sort of business is going to interest you. And I would say keep in touch with that broker. Talk with them every, I don't know, couple months or something like that, and remind them of who you are. because a lot of brokers will have things for sale that they don't put on the internet. And they will sometimes, obviously, their motivation is to sell a business quickly because the quicker they get it sold, the quicker they get their commission. And there are many brokers who will actually present opportunities to buyers they know before they go and list it on the internet. And so it certainly is a viable channel for finding businesses. I would say identify the brokers that handle the kind of businesses that you're after and build relationships with those brokers. Treat them like a partner in helping you find something. Just always remember that their job is to work for the seller to try to sell that business for the highest price they can.
Yeah, let's turn it this way that a seller woke up this morning saying that he wants to sell his business. How do we know that he is thinking about selling their business? Because there are some resources that they're going to talk with their employees or some kind of person they know that is going to buy with this business. So how do we properly connect with them?
So, first of all, you have to respect confidentiality. So, a business can be ruined if people find out it's up for sale. So, the last thing you want to do is walk into a business where there are employees, ask to speak to the owner, and then say, "Hey, I'd like to buy your business." It doesn't matter if the person wants to sell, they will not be able to say that to you because then their employees will find out that they want to sell their business. And this can damage the business because the last thing employees want is uncertainty. People who have a job, they want to get their paycheck every month or every 2 weeks. And so they rely on this. If they think the business is for sale, they might worry that maybe the business is closing, or maybe the new owner won't like them, or maybe the new owner has a cousin that's going to come and take their job, for example. And so you have to respect confidentiality. So you need to be aware that this has to be a secretive thing. So the best tool that I've found is to approach the sellers with like a letter or something like this that they can read in private and that they can keep so that if conditions change in their business a few months later, they can reach back out to you. But so you need to respect confidentiality. You also have to understand that most of the people you talk to are not going to be interested in selling. But the more that you network and talk to people in an industry, the closer you're going to get to meeting people who may be actual targets. And when I say network within an industry, I'm not just talking about the business owners. I'm also talking about the people, for example, who sell to those businesses. So if let's use our auto repair business as an example. If you wanted to buy an auto repair business, you could also meet the people that sell equipment and tools to auto repair businesses, and you can let those people know, I'm interested in buying an auto repair business. If you ever hear from one of your customers that they might need to sell, please let me know. And so you can network with others in the industry. And sometimes certain industries are organized. They have associations or they have trade shows or places where people come together to learn about new products. And so you can get involved with that too. This is why industry selection is so important. When people don't know what kind of business they want, they get pulled in all these different directions. They I call it window shopping. So I don't know if you've ever been to like a shopping street or in a shopping center and the merchants have different things up. And if you don't know what you're looking at, you're going to get distracted. If you don't know what you're looking for, you're going to get distracted by all the different things on display. And if you compare that with going, grocery shopping, if you have a list, you know exactly what items you want to buy. And so that's what I say to people is create that list. Define what the business is, what industry it is, how big it is, maybe by revenue or by the number of employees, so that when you find that business, you're going to recognize it and say, yeah, that's the kind of business that I want to buy. And so then you can make an effort to meet that person, let them know that you're interested in buying that kind of business. And if they say that they're not interested in selling, you should still try to develop a relationship with them because they might end up introducing you to someone they know in the industry. A lot of the times people may have similar businesses and they know each other and they become friends over the years. And I've got many examples of buyers that I've been working with who have done this exercise where they've spent a lot of time on the phone talking with business owners and they end up getting introduced to people who were never on their list and they do deals with some of these people. So it's all about getting out there and making a connection with people.
Yeah, and if a seller has some interest in selling their business, what resources can we use to increase their interest on the sell side? And I heard a man doing the same thing. He said to the seller, man, if you could all drop the frustrations and the tensions of the business and travel with your wife and go on vacations and have a stable annuity coming to you. Not only he was able to buy the business, but he financed the thing by
Mhm.
80%.
Yeah, that's a great deal. In order for a seller to do that, they have to be confident that you're going to be a qualified operator. And so this is what I say but when I say that the relationship is important, because you want to be able to share with that person, what your experience is, what kind of things you've done in your past, so that they could feel confident knowing that they can trust you to operate the business properly.
Yeah. And what resources do you use and then before considering a business to buy and get it through your list of all the businesses that you have that you would reach for buying and contacting the owners? What is your criteria and specificities to ensure that this business is right for me?
So I would look at your work history, and you're pretty young. And so I always advise people that a business is an asset, but it's a very illiquid asset. It can take a long time to find one. It can be hard to buy one. Once you own it, it can take a long time to sell it if you decide you don't like it anymore. And so, my advice to a lot of people is if you think that you're interested in a certain industry, one of the easiest things you can do is try to get a job in that industry. From inside a business, you can really learn a lot about what it's really like to own that kind of business. You can learn who the customers are, you can learn what the troubles are in that industry. You know, from the outside of a business looking at it, you might say, wow, they sell a lot of things. They must be having a lot of profit. But once you're in the business and you maybe see that there's waste or inefficiencies or other things, you get a clearer idea of what the business is really like, what the industry is really like. I've had people over the years who have gone after a certain kind of business and they've gone and taken a job in one of those businesses and very quickly realized that it's not what they thought and that they probably would not be happy running that kind of business. So, especially for young people, you know, develop some experience. When you're thinking about what kind of industry you want to be in, one of the criteria for the industry should be, is this an industry that has a lot of independently owned businesses? So this is where, you know, auto repair or corner markets or things like that are going to be stronger because many of them are independently owned versus a kind of industry where there may be only a couple of businesses in each city that do that thing. There's going to be far fewer opportunities for you to be able to buy one of those than in an industry where there's a lot of independent operators.
Okay, so David, why would a seller sell his business and work as an employee in that business? Because I have seen some cases like that. What is the reason in that?
Well, do you see all the gray hair on the side of my head? So all of this gray hair came from different points when I was operating a business. And when you operate a business, there can be a lot of stress. So at one particularly low point in one of my businesses, um, my bank account was empty. I had drawn my line of credit and I had to pay my employees. And what I ended up doing was I had to take a cash advance on my credit card, personal credit card, and deposit this money into my bank account so that I could pay my employees. And I was awake almost all the whole night trying to figure out how I was going to get the money for payroll. And so those kinds of stresses after a while can really wear a person down. And if somebody has done well in business, or even if they haven't, and they're getting to an age where they just don't want to have this kind of stress and anxiety in their life, but they still enjoy talking to the customers and they're good at what they do in the business, and maybe they're very skilled at something, then I can totally see the appeal of somebody willing to sell a business and then keep going there every day to work. And especially if someone's going to finance part of the transaction for you, that would be one of the best ways for them to keep an eye on what's going on to make sure that you're doing a good job managing the business. Um, so I totally understand that desire from someone. Um, and I don't see very often where sellers want to work full time in a business, but I've seen many instances where sellers will still be involved. Like they'll go to an annual trade show with the company because that's where they'll meet customers that have been around for many years. Or maybe they come in at a certain time of year when the business is particularly busy. So maybe at the holiday season, if it's a retail shop. Or I can think of one example right now of an accountant that sold his business, but he still comes back every year at tax time when they're very busy to help out. And they pay him for it, but he knows that that's the big stressful period of time in the business, and his activity is limited to just preparing the tax returns, that are given to him on the pile of work that he has to do. And so he can go in there, he can do the work and get paid and not have to worry about everything else going on in the business. And I just had my 48th birthday, and I don't feel old, but I'm certainly starting to understand that I don't have the same level of energy that I did when I was 25. And so I can appreciate the 60-year-old men, for example, that start to think that this might be a good move for them.
Oh, okay. So how have you ever structured a zero down deal or no money out of pocket deal?
Yeah, so I have, but not for anyone who's broke. So this is a key thing. There are people online that will talk about how you can structure a zero down deal. I've seen people do it, but I've never seen a broke person do it. And so what I mean is that people who already own businesses, who already have other assets, real estate, property, etc., they are often in a position where they can leverage their assets in order to do a deal with none of their own money. But I've never seen a broke person actually maneuver to get a deal with nothing down. Because even if you find a seller who agrees to sell you a business and finance it entirely, there's other things that go into the acquisition. There's other things you have to pay for. And often, even if the seller is willing to give you the business and finance it entirely, they're often not willing to give you the operating capital that they use. The money in their bank account or the money in the till, right? And so even though they may be willing to transfer you the business with no consideration on closing, you still need money to make the business operate. And I'm I've been very critical of a lot of those people online because I think what they do is they create hope for people that have very limited means, that if they learn some kind of special trick that they'll be able to pull off these deals. And unfortunately, most of those stories end pretty negatively.
Yeah, and if you want to raise funds to buy a business, not considering that you're brokerage and have some contacts in the industry, how would you raise fund as a newbie to buy a business and involve some persons in the business?
Okay. So raising money from investors or partners, that's a different kind of conversation because when a bunch of people get together and pool their resources, I consider that group to be the buyer. So you can have an individual who finds an opportunity and then they get some partners who maybe have some money and then they do a deal. So it's totally possible. Here are the challenges. Number one, you have to usually know people who have money to invest, right? And when you're talking about doing your first deal, people are going to look at you more than the business because they're going to realize that a business will succeed or fail based on its operator. And so people with a track record in an industry are certainly going to have a much easier time doing this, convincing people to invest money than someone who's never done it before. And for most small businesses, really the only options for people to find investors are people that know you personally. They have to know what kind of person you are. They have to trust that you're going to be willing to work hard and that you're going to be capable. And so I've met many people over the years who will have this aspiration. They'll say, I want to raise money from investors. And I'll say, great. Have you made a list of people you know that have money that could be investors? And so the exercise of doing this actually requires you maybe to develop your personal network. So going to places where you're going to meet people that are going to be qualified, people that have money to invest, and then developing relationships with them where they can get to know you and know that you are a good person, that you're going to, you're honorable, you're going to do what you say you're going to do and keep your word and everything. Um, And so that can take a long time, right? Um, there are sort of groups of more sophisticated people, what they call accredited investors. They're usually looking at bigger deals because they're looking for some kind of rate of return, et cetera. Um, and if you get into trying to raise money from those people, you have to be very careful about the securities rules of wherever it is that you happen to be. When you offer shares or even debt financing to other individual people to get involved in a small business purchase, you are creating what are called securities. And securities are highly regulated in almost every country on earth. So you have to be very careful that you know what the rules are and that you're following all of this stuff very carefully. And so, to your point about doing a deal with no money, as soon as you start to talk about securities legislation and making sure that you're compliant, now you're talking about lawyers' fees. And so you can end up investing a lot of money with lawyers just to make sure that when you go and ask people for investment that you're not breaking any rules.
Okay, so David, would you buy a business from a boring a young entrepreneur? Would you buy a business from a young entrepreneur or a person that is going to retire the next day looking to buy a business? I forgot the name, what we call baby boomers. Yeah. Would you buy a
Okay.
business from a baby boomer or a young entrepreneur, a 35-year entrepreneur looking to move forward on his next project and selling this business and going through an exit and selling the business to you and selling the whole entire process to you?
So, you know, everyone can understand that a baby boomer might want to sell to retire because that generation is of an age where this is what they're doing now. And some people are very cautious when they see a younger person, for example, 35 years old, that wants to sell a business. But in my experience, working with clients and when I had my business brokerage open, I met all kinds of people that were in their 30s and early 40s who wanted to sell businesses. Remember those five reasons. Retirement is only one of them. So burnout, boredom, and fatigue, that's a real thing. That's probably the most common reason why people want to sell a business. And so people get tired of it. If it was a job, they would find a new job and they would quit. But for most people, that business represents a good portion of their family's net worth. And so they can't really just quit and walk away. They need to sell it because they need to get the resources to do the next thing. So if someone said to me, I want to move on to a new project, I'm interested in doing something else now, I think that's a totally believable reason for wanting to sell. Um, you're still going to do your due diligence. You're going to verify everything that you've been told. And I would say that you still want to have a good degree of seller financing subject to offset just to guarantee everything you're told is accurate in that process. But I don't necessarily think people should discriminate on age. And one of the things that I've learned over the course of time is that people who want to sell because of retirement, um, oftentimes they give themselves a lead time. They decide sometime in their 60s that they want to be retired by a certain point in the future. They actually can be some of the least motivated sellers out there because they have time. And a lot of them have operated their business for many decades. They know it really well and they enjoy it. That's why they're still there. And so I've seen people put their business up for sale in their mid 60s, and 5 years later, they still own it. They've had offers, but they're waiting for a really great offer. And then once they get into their 70s, then maybe they're willing to accept something lower. So I don't think the reason for sale should be used to prejudge, if it's a good business or not. It's important to ask just to find out why, but I wouldn't say that one scenario is any better than the other.
Yeah. And what are the resources that have helped you along the way doing deals and closing all the deals?
So the biggest resource that helped me was when I went through my training. I went through the IBBA program. It's called a Certified Business Intermediary Training. So when I had my business brokerage office opened, that's where I learned a lot. I was also part of a franchise network, so that I did training and development through their office too. And then it's just the experience. When I had my brokerage opened, I sold over 35 businesses for other people. And then over the years since then, and it's been almost 12 years now since I sold the brokerage, I've worked with hundreds of other people who are buying and selling and just seeing so many different scenarios and so many different businesses and seeing so many different sets of financial statements. Um, you start to see what's going to happen. I'll give you a quick example. One of my coaching clients in California found a reasonably priced business with respect to its cash flow. So the business earned a couple $100,000 a year, and the seller wanted $495,000, which is a pretty reasonable price. But within the company, there was a little bit more than $500,000 worth of inventory. And when he showed me the business, I said, "Are you sure that the inventory is included? Is that what they believe?" And he said, "Yep, that's what the document says. The document says the inventory is included." And I said, "Okay." I said, "You should make an offer, but I bet you before we're done, this is going to become a problem because I've seen this over and over again." And true to what I said, he made an offer. And then the broker called him and said, "We have a bit of a problem. The seller, is now saying that he wants extra money because of the inventory level." And so I've seen the scenarios play out so often that and this is the value I think that I bring to the people that I work with, because when you're doing something new that you've never done before, one of the biggest advantages you can have is just to have somebody set your expectations so that you know what is likely coming. So when I saw that, I said to my client, expect this to happen. And here are some different ways that we can respond to that. And so he was ready for it. And it wasn't as big of a shock as it might have been if he wasn't prepared.